Hey everyone, Darlanian here. Welcome back to my dungeon. Today we continue our journey on Stormwreck Isle. My party's actually going to Seagrow Caves in the next miniature movie adventure. So today I want to focus on finishing the remaining unpainted miniatures I didn't have, but did have in 2D form. When you look at the package here, you're seeing the Myconid Adults and the Myconid Sovereign and Sprouts packaged together. So I paid $4.99 here, and this was by out of the box in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. The Myconid Sovereign and Sprouts, these guys were actually from Cardboard Memories in Brampton, Ontario, Canada. So I do have these in 2D form. If you see my other video, I do a 2D versus 3D comparison, the 2D acrylic miniatures versus the 3D premium painted heroes that were for Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. But I had to get the 3D miniatures. I keep saying this pretty much every video. So for this package here, you're just seeing the two Sprouts and the Sovereign Myconid, which this is a large creature, and this is two small creatures. So I'm showing the Sovereign Myconid here beside the actual back of the package. So I'm going to use that as my reference for all the colors compared to the package. It's pretty good. I can actually see the colors well. Now we're going to open this bad boy up. So again, clear base. Love that. Here you go. Here's the detail on the large miniature, which is the Sovereign Myconid. But yeah, this looks a lot better. And this is with no color. I mean, look at the textures on that, if you can see. Oh, that's cool. That is really cool. So yeah, you know what? Let's start with those little guys first because that'll just be easy to begin, get my confidence going. So today we're going to use Purple Worm, and then afterwards I'm just going to use a purple tone, and that'll darken everything. Okay, so the brushes that I'll be using, the basic Dungeons and Dragons paintbrush set. And with that, again, you get the base coat, the detail, and the dry brush. Just from personal experience, if I add a little bit of primer, just dilute it, I just feel it tacks on a lot better. But if you overdo it, you will destroy the detail that you're trying to paint over top, so do be careful. To begin again, you want to just squeeze out any remaining liquid at the very beginning, don't shake it. Shake it vigorously, and then put some, yeah, there we go, we're good. Then of course, wet your brush, and with your primer, I'm recommending you just, from your wet brush, quickly dab it into your primer, dilute it, and then we get started. So yeah, within seconds, I'm just throwing on some primer, getting on every part of the surface. That way the paint tacks on beautifully. So for the base coat of the Myconid Sprouts, we're going to use the Purple Worm. Oh, that's going on nicely, very easily. So less is more, it'll get on. And you do want to wet your brush in between. A couple times you do this, so it doesn't dry on your brush. The Purple Worm. Let's let that dry. But I'm going to apply a thin second coat. The more coats you put on, I mean, the more paint that'll be on the surface, which is less detail every time. Okay, so that's the second coat of the second Myconid Sprout. I'm gonna let this dry. The first one should be dry. So I'm gonna be using Beholder Purple with Lawful White. So now I'll be using the dry brush to just put the smallest amount on the bristles and then wipe it on a piece of paper towel here, or a napkin, whatever. You just wanna get rid of almost all of it until there's the smallest amount. I'm going to give it a purple tone. Let us use the detail brush, shall we? Yep, just touching. Like, I mean, I'm just barely grazing. And then on the face, again, those two eyes, I can see them in the camera. I'm just using the purple tone. I'm going to leave that and then go to number 2. I can see the different shades of dark purple to light purple. So I'm going to apply some more wash on the body right now on both of them. So again, I'm going to try and get in that small crevice, these striations of the muscle, I believe. These little lines on the feet, I'm going to try and get in there. Underneath the mushroom cap, there's a whole bunch of lines there where the spores are. So I do believe I have to add some more purple tone to this, even though I was trying to avoid to. So yep, I'm just loading it on, but trying to get it in the crevices. Unlike before, I was very cautious. Now I am not. So I'm gonna go to number 2. We're just gonna, in spots, just go over like streaks. I'm gonna add another coat of purple tone. Okay, these guys are both pretty wet, so I'm gonna let them dry for about 15-20 minutes. Might as well get started and prime the Sovereign Myconid. So I'm just gonna prime them really quick. Okay, I've primed them up. All right, so now looking at the sprouts, I need to add a slight highlight on the mushroom head here. There's a bit of gradient there. I just want to capture that if I can. I'm just going to mix some of the Beholder Purple with Lawful White Mix the two together. All right, so getting rid of the excess paint down in one motion, again, one direction, just the smallest stroke. I'm hardly putting any on, just once. So that's all I'm gonna do, just that little amount. And for the second one, just the smallest, oh, that might have been too much. One stroke, one more stroke, and last one. So yeah, I'm digging that, that's very cool. Wetting the brush, the dry brush, and one more time, just a hair purple tone. I want it to be streaky, get rid of some of it, but make it look like it's streaky, almost like a random gradient. So I'm gonna let that dry. So I was priming him when we were waiting for the highlights to show through. That looks really cool. So my point of reference here, again, is the 2D acrylic, but it's excellent. Shows me every part. So for his head and his hands, we're gonna use Cambion Crimson. I'm just worried about getting a base coat on, doing a second coat after, make sure there's no gray spots coming through. Also, I'm gonna spread this out as much as possible, even though it'll show the gray through, it'll retain the detail, and I keep reiterating that. So I believe this goes down to his shoulder. Yeah, it's this layer right here, I think. Wet your brush every now and then, like every few rounds. Don't put a ton of paint on. Again, I know I'm a broken record, but it'll look really good if you follow these steps. Now his right forearm. Now his left forearm. So for our first coat, that's decent. As we're waiting for the red to dry, I'm just gonna do the chest, calves, shins and feet, and the back here are brown. I'll be using Bugbear Brown, starting with his feet. Not worried about the base getting any of the brown. Just getting a base coat on with the base coat brush. Again, not too worried about spilling into other areas because I'm not only going to paint over top of it, but I need that there for the gradient going from a brown to a green. But I do want to spread out, again, making sure this stuff does not destroy the detail. When I say destroy, so the paint doesn't clog up all those fine little lines and then dry up. So as that's drying, the brown, I can now do a second coat of the Cambion Crimson. Okay, so now I have a second coat of Cambion Crimson. I feel like Feywild Emerald is closer to this green on his shoulder. See how it looks like this green stretches just along this thin layer here? I'm still using the base coat brush, which I should be using detail. But for my first coat, I'm not too worried. Just talking about my process here, the green I have looks far darker, whereas this one looks more matte and dull. And also to the brown, you see how that goes right into the legs, that it becomes green and brown. So you're gonna see the difference of when I dry brush, just that brown into that green. So back to the Bugbear Brown for the dry brush. Okay, I'm gonna get all that off. I do want to keep more on the brush this time. So I want it to look like they're bleeding into each other if I can. Kind of blend in together completely, not just highlight it. So continuing on to the back of the body, and just getting rid of the remaining paint off my dry brush and blending that brown into the entire body. While at the same time trying to avoid any of the red. So just giving a slight little gradient. I'm going to use Feywild Emerald again on the dry brush. And then going over those spots again on the legs using the dry brush. And then blending it into the abdomen and a little bit on the sides and then back again on the spine, having it look like everything meshes into one unit. Back again to the Bugbear Brown for the dry brush, and then just using my eyes, seeing what looks good as I'm blending in the brown again on the body and the legs. Oh, that is looking pretty sweet to me. Okay, I'm gonna move on. So just looking at my 2D acrylic again as the reference, I'm trying to lighten up the red all over his body. So we're gonna be using Ruddy Skin to add a highlight to the crown, as well as using it on the dry brush. Just looking at the 2D acrylic right now, you can see the brow and the crown along his forehead. That's what we're going to use for ready skin. So just taking the detail brush and grazing the highest ridges along the forehead here. Just touching. Just touching. And then we're going to go around the brow, around his eyes, and highlight that area. And now taking the dry brush, using ready skin, we're going in one direction, upwards, along his face, trying to get the highest ridges to catch it, make it three-dimensional here. Now you can start to see that thing pop. So now I'm going to dry brush Cambion Crimson on top of the highlight to mute it a bit because I feel it's way too pronounced, and this will give it a subtle effect. Just looking at my 2D acrylic as my reference for the arms. I'm going to choose Lich Blue, just painting around the biceps and the triceps on both arms. Also can't forget the tips of the crown. Using Cambion Crimson for touch-ups. And now we're going to use Ready Skinned to dry brush on the forearms to give them a highlight. And now I'm going to apply it to the shins and the calves, the same paint on that brush, just getting rid of it to give them a highlight, as well as the torso. Just a little bit on the legs, the sides, just blending it in to where that brown and green is. So I am super pleased with this so far. I mean, I think I just have to do tones now and we should be good to go. We'll be using blue, soft, red, and green tones. Now we're going to use the red tone and place it in the pockets of the forehead inside the crown here. Just want to give it that three-dimensional pop. And then smearing the remainder of that on my brush along any of the textures in the back and the front here. And then adding some red tone to the forearms, so over time it'll dry and give it some depth. Now we're going to switch to soft tone. We ideally just want to trace these lines here, the textures, using a detailed brush. Hardly any amount on our brush. I highly recommend that you leave the smallest textures to the end once you've used some of the tone on your brush. There's hardly any on it, and then you can rub it all in there. That way it gets in. And now we're going to use the green tone on the shoulder. Using the detail brush, I ideally just want to touch the lines. And now using the blue tone for the biceps and the triceps. I'm just basically painting the blue tone on their arms here. And now we'll be adding Merfolk Turquoise onto the dry brush. Just getting a little bit on the very tips at the edge of the crown here. And we're just gonna get the remaining paint on the dry brush all over the bicep, and that'll give it a highlight as well. Just gonna see if this shows anything on the shins here and up to the knee, because I believe the 2D acrylic had some sort of color variation. Back to ready skin on the dry brush, doing a little bit of highlights again, just the smallest amount. Looking at the 2D acrylic as our reference here, I see some purple in the torso and the lower shin area. Gonna go with Beholder Purple for the highlight. We just want a hint of this purple, barely visible. Alright, so looking at the two side by side, I'm very pleased with the end result, but just being critical of myself, looking at the 2D acrylic, I can see on the feet it looks more like a Cambion Crimson hue and maybe not Beholder Purple. I do see purple on the kneecap there. Also could have maybe blended the forearms with the biceps better or something, because it looks like there's some purple there. And yeah, other than that, the Feywild Emerald should have been Treant green for lighter green, not so dark. But next is the Myconid Adults. And then this is a great example of what they should look like. They're also featured in the back of the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle stat block portion of the book. So I'm going to bust this package open right now in front of you guys, and let's get it started. I'm going to have to prime 8 of these guys, so you're not going to see all of that, but I will show you. They do not have the clear bases. These are the black bases, so I'm guessing this is an older model. I hope it is, because I want all of them to be clear bases moving forward. I thought that was cooler. Oh, that's awesome. That is so cool. Love the detail. Again, not even painted, just seeing every little line, nook and cranny. So real quick, I'm just going to quickly prime all 8 of them. You don't have to see this. Alright, so here are all the 8 adult Myconids that I've primed. So they're ready to go and paint. I'm only going to show you the first 2 here that come in one package. So I'm going to choose Rust Monster for the orange at the top of the mushroom head for both the adult Myconids. So here it goes. And it's okay that I get that orange all the way down, but I'm going to have to do a couple other steps to make it look cooler. Make it look like the way it's supposed to on the back of the package. So quickly just applying all the orange on the head and going into the back of the head here. So this guy, he's just in a different position. So same thing like we did with the other guy. We're just getting his entire head and crown completely orange. Okay, so now it's been 5 coats. Crazy. I'm not even going to use the entire orange at the top of the head. I'm going to actually give it a highlight, so just wanted to make sure that that color was there, because it's half the crown, I believe. So as you can see right now, I've got the orange. I'm going to change it to a gradient over time, but I'm not going to do highlights until we finish getting the base colors on first, the entire body. Next portion, I'm going to do the face, which would be the beard or the mouth. Looks like ethereal blue to me with white highlight, so I'm just going to ethereal blue on all of the faces. So I'm going to use the ethereal blue right here all over this beard. So I think after that second coat, that looks like enough ethereal blue on their faces. I'm going to try and mix Treant green with Merfolk turquoise, see if I can get a color that best represents this. So I just did 1:1 ratio. I'm going to apply it to the torso, moving on to the hips. Putting way too much paint on this. I didn't intend to do that. I was just mixing the paints, not realizing what I was doing. So that's an example of 1 coat for 1 guy. I'm gonna do the second one. So starting at the back, shoulders, biceps, going along. Try not to touch the beard. I call it the beard, the face, whatever it is actually, I'm not too sure. Different anatomy for different creatures, right? This guy feels a little smaller than the other one. Okay, so 2 coats of the turquoise green combination. So I'm going to go with Beholder purple for the shins and the forearms. What's cool is because I'm doing a gradient from forearm to bicep, I'm not too concerned about this paint going into the other color at all. Okay, so that's just a quick base coat on the forearms and the shins. I'm going to do a second coat. Here's the other variation. Okay, so that was 1 round of Beholder Purple on the forearms and the legs. Doing a second coat now. Okay, so based on what I'm looking at here, I'm going to use Ancient Mummy around his eyes. Okay, so I'm using my detail brush and taking it off the paintbrush, just putting it on my plate. That way there's hardly any on there. Just lightly touch the edge, but I'm okay with getting it at the top here. And I'm going to put it along the back of the neck. I'm trying not to get it in his beard, and I'm okay with that. That'll need a second coat later. But moving on to the second one, just trying to avoid, I say the beard, the mouth area. Let's let that dry. Then on to the other 6. Okay, so that's 1 coat of Ancient Mummy on their front, eyebrows, and leading out to the back of their skulls. Doing another coat. So we're going to be using Ancient Mummy to do the dry brushing just above the eyebrow leading up to the skull. I'm going to stroke upwards from his brow. So the idea is that we're slightly blending. I put way too much on my brush still. I didn't get rid of enough. But you can see that I'm blending it upwards. I'm using this guy, so I haven't put any more on my brush, but just from the last amount. Alright, so I'll be using Fire Newt Orange to use the middle gradient, going from Ancient Mummy to Fire Newt Orange to Rust Monster. and about to dry brush it, but not really get rid of all the paint, just most of it, leaving it still a bit wet, and then stroking from the top downwards, like so. Just a little bit in the midsection. The actual head here, just stroking upwards or down one direction essentially. So I want to try and make that transition smoother. The gradient with more orange going from the top down. Let that dry. That's how much little paint you need on your dry brush. Alright, so this is where we're at right now. The heads look really good to me. Like, I'm very happy with that. And now it's just getting that gradient in between the purple and the green. So I'm going to dry brush with the ethereal blue again. Let's see what happens. Again, you want to take that ethereal blue and put it all over a piece of paper towel or something until there's hardly anything on there. And I mean hardly anything. It's better to add more later. I'm going to go sideways from left to right across this way. Just subtly. There it is. Check that out. Like, that's just from a few strokes. Oh, I hope that's catching on camera. I'm gonna go along the lines. It looks like it's slowly, gradually growing into it. Yes, oh, I'm happy with that. So look at that one arm compared to this arm. That is the beauty of the dry brush technique. And so now to the other arm, and I'm gonna go along this way. So from top to bottom, lightly, over and over and over and over in the same spot until I see it slowly change right there. Nice, nice. Then the back. Okay, now I'm going to do it on his legs, going from left to right over and over. Just like that a few times. Boom. Showing a subtle gradient. So just to show you the difference between one that is done and one that is not done. Just using that dry brush technique, just a few times over in between the two colors. I'm still amazed, even though I've been doing this for a while now. It just seems to blow me away still. So now I'm going to be doing this to the other version. So I have 6 more of these guys to do, just like that, and then I'll show you on the tray. Now that I'm doing this, just subtly too, I recommend on the body, just once or twice, get that ethereal blue, just a hint, so it looks like it's bleeding all into each other, one smooth motion. Oh, I'm loving that. That is cool. And now that I'm doing this as well, I'm applying that dry brush technique to the back, just a few times on the ridges. I'm going to do that to all of them. I'm going to give them a light dry brush of the ethereal blue along the bodies, just a little bit, and then on the back as well. All right, check that out. Just the little subtle differences, having those gradients come in. I'm pretty happy with that. So I will be using Abyssal Black for all of their eyes. You hardly want any on your brush. I just even dab it and then smear it off on my plate or palette. All right, so now these guys have eyes. I'm just going to touch up some of the ancient mummy, I believe it was, that we used for the yellow around the brow. So on both references that I'm using, the actual manual and this, I can see like there's a brown stripe or an orange stripe on their shoulder, leading into maybe their abdomen and possibly on their forearm. So I'll be using the Fire Newt Orange to do this. I'll be using the detail brush for this. Just showing that I'm trying to get in his armpit a little bit. Just like so, nothing too crazy. We're trying to follow some of this unique design. So just basically shoulder stripe along underneath the beard stripe. I'm going to do along the thigh and just that, maybe in the back stripe, boom, just that, because we're adding a shade to it. So on the alternative, again, I'm going to choose the innermost shoulder blade on this side, following the ridge, trying to just get that part not coating on the inside, just giving a bit of difference. So looking at this photo, the claws or their fingers, I'm going to be using Owlbear Brown because that's the darkest brown that I have in my collection. I recommend that you use the detail brush for this. I'm going to attempt using Pixie Dust Pink on their beards. If you look at this picture I'm using as a reference in the actual guide for Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, it does show like a neon pink highlighted right around the beard. Here goes, stroking from top to bottom and only in the middle. I don't want to go past that, just the middle. When I've done that, it actually just looks like the ethereal blue and that pink mixed together. Literally, I don't see any difference. I'm going to use a soft tone and barely get in the crevices of these guys. I kind of don't even want to put it on, but I'm going to see what this looks like. Using soft tone, quick shade, the army painter. So I'm just going to use my detail brush and get in those crevices. Okay, so just getting it on my brush, not too much. So I'm trying to just trace over anywhere that I see a three-dimensional line. Does this make sense? Like a layer, that's what I'm trying to say. Just drawing lines along the shell. Just want to lightly get it in there. It's not going to do anything too dark, but it's going to help make all of that pop. Yeah. I would just want to get that line and that line, not on top. All right, adding tone to this guy, the second one. It's all scrunched in. So I won't be too finicky with this one at all. Okay, so we're gonna do a highlight on the beard, on the face there. We're gonna mix ghostly blue with lawful white. Gonna grab our trusty dry brush, mix the two paints together. I'm gonna add a bit more white, so 2-to-1 ratio on that. 2-to-1 white over ghostly blue. Doing our dry brush technique. Get it off your paintbrush completely, almost, sorry I should say. So this time I want to be careful because I do want to keep that pink highlight. So I'm gonna brush from top to bottom in the smallest, in the shortest stroke. Compared to each other, I feel like the highlighted one we just did is better than no highlight. So I'm going to continue with the others. So next, I'd like to do Merfolk Turquoise. And I want to put it on the shoulder blade. You can see that right there. So right after that orange. Then for the little guy, the smaller version, I am going to get Merfolk Turquoise on the mid part of his shoulder. We're going to mix Fire Newt Orange with Ancient Mummy, and that's going to be the exterior shoulder blade. I ended up using that Fire Newt Orange mixed with the Ancient Mummy on the opposite shoulder as well, these alternatives, having it connect down to that middle part stripe that I had before. So it's actually going from a lighter color to that regular Newt Fire Orange. There's some lines showing here that I want to add a purple tone to make that pop a bit better. The soft tone I found just didn't work as well. Using a detail brush, I want to pull that back away from the figure. Alright, I'm going to do that to the rest of them. Even though we did this with soft tone, I think now that I've done it, I would much prefer purple tone. Makes more sense. So if you go to do yours, don't do soft tone, do purple tone, or blue tone, I guess. That would work better. Before I forget, another cool thing, showing purple tone, so you want to be able to get just in these little pockets, barely dab, 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 dab. Just dab it, don't put maybe a little stroke, oh my god. It's hard to dab it. Looking at the phone, oh, yes. Nice. There we go. Just purple tone. Boom. Look at that. Just instant pop. So I'll be using green tone on the bodies of these Myconid Adults. Everywhere that there's green on his quads, up to his crotch, to his abdomen, along his chest, into his shoulders, and definitely his back. Wherever there's green. Just a little bit difficult to do it on camera, but just to give you an idea. On the cracks, you can see those giant gaps. Just tracing on the insides of these with the green shade, just in those crevices, and then let that dry. Ooh, that's looking good. We already had some tone in there, right? From the soft tone, but this will be better. So we used Owlbear Brown to do his claws, and now I'm going to use Bugbear Brown to just put a light stripe on the edge of his claws so it looks like it's giving a 3D effect. So just one swipe, like very gently, like that. Maybe too thick there. Dun dun dun. Alright, 8 adult Myconids, 2 Myconid Sprouts, 1 Sovereign Myconid, ready to go for Dragons of Stormwreck Isle Chapter 2. Be sure to subscribe and don't miss out to see how my party handled this adventure using the entire Warlock Tile gaming system. Seagrow Caves Chapter 2 coming very soon.